are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Ahmedabad City Police Commissioner G.S. Malik has told Associated Press said that there appear to be no survivors from Air India plane crash. An Air India flight en route from Ahmedabad to London had crashed shortly after takeoff today. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner operating as flight AI-171 took off from Ahmedabad at 1:38 p.m. local time. The aircraft was powered by GE Aerospace's Gen X-1B engines. Just 5 minutes later, it went down in a residential area called Meghani Nagar. Thick smoke and dust could be seen for miles. On board were 242 people, including 230 adults, 2 infants, and 12 crew members. Of the passengers, there were 169 Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 1 Canadian national, and 7 Portuguese nationals. The pilot in command has been identified as Sumit Sabharwal, with co-pilot Clive Kunder. The Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport has been shut down, and all flights were temporarily suspended. However, flight operations have now resumed at the airport, according to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, India. Safety protocols are being carried out following this crash. 3 NDRF teams comprising of 90 rescuers have been rushed in from Gandhinagar, with more teams en route from Vadodara. Directorate General of Civil Aviation officials who were already in Ahmedabad for another task are now investigating this incident. Multiple international reactions have poured in since the crash, with various heads of states expressing their condolences. Now we have this guest discussion on this topic. He's a retired Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, former senior official and of Indian Air Force. Thank you, Kapil Kak, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How swiftly and transparently is the Directorate General of Civil Aviation responding to this crisis, according to you?
No, I think 2 or 3 points are very, very crucial. One is that this is a deeply saddening and disappointing news for global aviation and Indian aviation in specific terms. There are large body aircraft, hundreds of which are flying in the world skies, crashes after takeoff in Ahmedabad, as you said, just 4.5 hours back. And the Directorate General of Civil Aviation has already issued, just a while back, a detailed statement on this particular accident. Very deeply saddening. And as you said, condolences are coming from all over the world, heads of state, heads of government. There is a wave of prayers for the safety of the passengers, which unfortunately have not fructified because as per the latest reports, there seem to be no survivors of the 242 people, including 10 operating crew and 2 operating crew and 10 cabin crew who are on board, including 2 babies. So I think, how will I respond to some of the specific queries if you have in mind? I leave the floor to you.
And Dr. Sir Kak, should Air India and the DGCA have foreseen any red flags before this flight, according to you?
According to my assessment of the situation, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner has had minor glitches after it joined the fleet. It's been flying now in the world skies for nearly 2 decades. And there have been no major glitches one has noticed. Sadly, a mammoth glitch has taken place in terms of the crash of this wide-bodied aircraft, unfortunately at the Ahmedabad airport in India. What could have been foreseen? Aviation is a very technical business. One doesn't do any soothsaying, nor does one do any speculation. Aircraft fly. If there are problems in the aircraft, whether technical or from the operating side, these are reported on ground as soon as the aircraft lands. Action is taken on these, and this is a routine not just for 787, but all civil commercial airliners all over the world. So it has come completely as a bolt from the sky, so to speak, because it has not been foreseen. A range of possibilities exist as to what could have happened. But for the sake of simplicity, for your viewers, I'd like to suggest 3 or 4 points for your consideration. One is the most critical point for an aircraft from a departure airfield to the arriving airfield or the destination airfield is the takeoff at the departure end and the landing at the arrival end. This was a problem of takeoff. As all the passengers get in, I'm simplifying it, as all passengers get in, doors are closed, the aircraft taxis, everything was normal. It lines up on the live runway takeoff point and does all the checks that are required and then seeks permission to take off, which the air traffic control has given this particular pilot. And he has rolled. There is a speed called the VR, velocity R, rotating. That means rotating speed. Now, what is it? This is a speed at which the aircraft has to take off, even if it has a problem, because it can sort out the problem in the air and land back. He has gone past the VR rotation speed, aircraft has taken off, and as you said in your introductory remarks, within a couple of minutes, I don't think it was 5 minutes, or much less than that, he has just attained a height of reportedly 400 to 600 feet, which is low for a commercial aircraft. And at that stage, instead of sustaining a climb on full power, that's when the aircraft is on full power, the aircraft has leveled out, gone straight and started to lose height instead of sustaining a climb, which means there has been some problem at that, what I call the critical point. Instead of sustaining a climb, it has actually leveled out and started to descend straight. Now, there could be any number of reasons. I don't think this discussion or conversation with you, Asuma, is going to wisen your viewers, because possibilities are endless. If you insist, I can give those possibilities. But the fact is the air pilot has not been able to control the aircraft. It has gone straight into buildings of what you named as Meghani Nagar, which is virtually on the outer boundary of the Ahmedabad airport. And since it was going on a nearly 9-hour flight from Ahmedabad to Gatwick International in London, it was carrying full fuel. And when an aircraft is carrying full fuel and it crash lands out of control, a fire and a major explosion is inevitable. And that's what has happened in this case. There are sufficient number of videos from the buildings in Meghani Nagar, the residents of those buildings, which bring to light the fact that aircraft was high enough for the pilot to retract the undercarriage. Because soon after takeoff, at a certain safety height, the undercarriage is retracted, and that facilitates the aircraft not to have any drag and sustain a climb to its cruising altitude, which is generally between 30 to about 40,000 feet, depending on the traffic en route and the segments of climb. So I think that is where the problem has arisen. It could be both engines failing as a result of some problem with the fuel supply. It could be a control column failure, which means elevator jamming, which cannot be resolved by today's systems, what are called fly-by-wire flight control systems. And it could be any other reasons. It could be a fire. The engines could have flamed out because of a bird hit, a flock of birds hitting both engines. It could be a control failure. It could be sabotage. And that's why people are speculating there could be reasons to have the National Investigation Agency look into the matter. So at this stage, I would suggest very strongly that we get out of the speculations regime, concentrate on relief and rehabilitation to the extent it is possible, and move on to investigating, and most importantly, before investigating, getting hold of the cockpit voice recorder, which records the conversations between the two pilots when they were going through with this emergency. That is it's a system component which can survive a crash. Likewise, what is called a black box, which is the flight data recorder, which gives every single parameter of the aircraft from the time it took off till the time it crashed, in terms of speed, in terms of altitude, in terms of flight control status. Every single parameter is recorded and graphically reproducible when you milk the data from the flight data recorder. This will happen as the first readout. We perhaps, given the range of the widespread reach of the international media and their interest in this accident, we may begin to get that information within weeks. But a full-fledged inquiry, which should be ordered by the Directorate General of Civil Aviation under the Indian Aircraft Rules Act, that may take a year. If we hasten it, it may take months. But we will get, because this will be a development which the stakeholders, all of them, whether it's the passengers, whether it's the Pilots Association, the Engineers Association, the manufacturer of the engine, which is the General Electric, the manufacturer of the aircraft, the Boeing company, all of their reputations are individually and collectively at stake in the globalized information world which we are part of.
And Sarkar, should there be an independent investigation beyond the DGCA to investigate this crash, as there are international passengers from Portuguese, UK, also and Canada also involved in this accident?
There is an international agreement under the International Civil Aviation Organization by which the sovereign jurisdiction of the country in which the accident takes place applies to the investigation of an aircraft accident. Since this took place in Ahmedabad in India, it will be the Directorate General of Civil Aviation of India which will order an inquiry, and that inquiry, if required, may have members of some of the component manufacturers, maybe the aircraft manufacturer itself. That is not barred, but it is not compulsory, because there are international passengers that the countries whose passengers are on this aircraft must have a separate inquiry. They can do it, but as per law, that privilege rests with the country where the accident has taken place. I say this, Asuma, because there may have been pressures under globalization in the recent years, but the world is still globalized. There is no airline, there's no aircraft flying as we talk just now, which is flying anywhere from Vancouver to Vladivostok and from Singapore to Sri Lanka, which doesn't have international passengers in it. So there'll be no end to the kind of investigations we will order on any aircraft or incident that takes place. So to that extent, I think we should leave it to the law as it exists currently.
We have Sarkak, you will stay with us. We have a breaking news coming. Global reactions continue to pour in following the deadly plane crash in Ahmedabad, India. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has tweeted expressing her condolences and also saying that Europe stands in solidarity with India in this moment of sorrow. Now we continue. The UK's King Charles III said he was desperately shocked by Thursday's air crash in India today, sending prayers and deepest possible sympathies to the families of those affected. My wife and I have been desperately shocked by the terrible events in Ahmedabad this morning, the monarch wrote on his Instagram, calling it a heartbreaking and traumatic time. Now we'll go back to our discussion with the retired Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, former senior officer from Indian Air Force. Thank you, Sir Kak, for staying with us. What more can you tell us about the current situation on the ground, as this was the plane crashed into a residential site?
Well, there was a time when the airports were away from residential areas. But with the rapid development world over, the pressure has come on the airports because the residential colonies have come up very, very close to the airports in question. This applies to every country in the world and every metropolitan area that one can think of. But the safety margins are very much there because whether it is takeoff clearances or landing clearances, there have to be margins, both horizontal and vertical, to ensure there is separation. There is also in some of the European capitals, now increasingly in India, of noise abatement measures. But to counter that, engines are also now far less noisy than they were before. Decibel levels are much lower. Likewise, within the aircraft, there was a certain acceptable limits of the kind of vibrations one would accept. Those have also lowered. So many ways, technology has overtaken the kind of concerns that you have that underlie your observation just now. It is inevitable that airports will be close to residential area. It is also inevitable that the countries in question will ensure sufficient safety margins to enable provision of certain basic safety to the residents against any untoward incidents that may occur in the air. It's all catered for. But in some cases, 1 out of 1 million, 1 out of 10 million, maybe one aircraft does close to the residential area. I have not until now, unless you have information, I haven't heard of any fatalities resulting from this crash in the residential areas where it took place and where it exploded. I haven't got that news till now. So in short, safety has been built in. Please do not forget that the Indian aviation is growing at roughly 15% every year. And when you compound it, you know how many more millions travel by aircraft. So therefore, how many more aircraft you need? This is not the case with the Western world, which has a growth rate of roughly about 3%. And it's sustained over many, many years. And it is not growing so much in the Western world as it's growing in developing countries like China and India. And that process will continue. But alongside it, and in many ways, increases the responsibility of the aviation regulators, aviation operators, and aviation infrastructure managers to be mindful of the interests of the passengers, as also the residents who live in the vicinity of airports. Usuma.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your expertise as a former senior officer of Indian Air Force, Marshal Kapil Khat. Now we move on to, we have another breaking news. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said he was devastated by the crash of an Air India passenger plane today, with all 242 people aboard believed to be killed. Devastated to learn the crash of a London-bound Air India plane in Ahmedabad carrying 242 passengers, including one Canadian. Prime Minister Carney posted on his X, "Canada's transportation officials are in close contact with counterparts, and I'm receiving regular updates as the response to this tragedy unfolds," he said. Now, we move on to Middle East. The United Nations General Assembly will vote today on a draft resolution calling for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution introduced by Spain is expected to pass with overwhelming support, even from countries that traditionally back Israel. It comes ahead of a major UN conference next week aimed at reviving talks on a two-state solution. The draft also demands unrestricted humanitarian access and strongly condemns the use of starvation and the denial of aid as methods of war. Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon has dismissed the vote as a politically motivated and counterproductive charade. He argues the resolution fails to condemn Hamas for the October 7, 2023 attacks or for using civilian sites as shields. Danon also criticizes the text for creating moral equivalence between Hamas hostages and Palestinian detainees, and accuses it of ignoring Israeli efforts to deliver aid, which he says is often stolen by Hamas. The United States has urged nations not to support the resolution or attend next week's peace conference. Israel's military reported arresting Hamas members near Damascus, Syria today. Syrian state TV said one Syrian was killed and 7 were detained during this operation. The incident marks a rare Israeli ground action in Syrian territory amid ongoing regional tensions. Now we are joined by Ali M. Abushbak. He's an independent Palestinian researcher. He's joining us from Cairo. Thank you, Ali, for joining us today. If the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly backs this resolution, what real impact can it have on the ground, given it's non-binding?
Thank you, Osama, for having me. The things is such kind of solution. It's held by everyone. Everyone has a conscience about, remain conscious about what is happening in Gaza. But on the ground, Palestinian is not optimistic about such kind of resolutions. Especially Israel has never adhered to the United Nations resolution. We have witnessed there is the resolution 2334 with regarding in 2016 with regard to Israeli settlement, and they consider it is illegal in the Palestinian territories. But still Israel showing that it doesn't have any ability to accept the international community decision or resolution, and also the resolution 242 about two-state solution. Israel never ever let the Palestinians to establish their statehood. So on the ground, Israel is not going to apply or accept any resolution to stop the war. And this is the big elephant on the room. Benjamin Netanyahu and his far right-wing coalition, it seems that they are ignoring everything. And we have witnessed last week's and yesterday that the international community, and especially British and Canada and Australia and etc., they condemn and they are put a sanction on the Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. But it seems that the Israelis ministry doesn't care, and it sounds like tomato. So the things is on the ground, it's not to clarify up to now as Israel is ready and they have what you call some person is serious to hold the war in Gaza or no. This is on one side. On other side, Palestinians still suffering, and we have witnessed that every international community condemned the Israelis. Prohibited the Palestinians to receive the humanitarian aid and attacking the people who's gathering to take their humanitarian aid or take their quota from the humanitarian aid. Despite all of this condemnation and despite all of this action and in the movement on the ground, Israel ignored these things. So it seems that Israel is not ready, it's not serious to stop the war in Gaza, and it seems that Israel is not ready to stop the killing machine. And the justification, it's ready for the Israel. They have the right to defend themselves. But also, we have to understand that the mentality of the Israeli military, is they are ready to hold the war or no? So this is the significant question. And about everyone accepted, and even Hamas agreed to release the hostages and the captive in one way. I mean, in all the captive in one in one deal. So this is the main question: is Israel ready for these things or no? Is Israel ready to withdraw from the Palestinian territories that they occupied after March? When they resumed the war after 18th of March, when they resumed the war in Gaza, and for one day, the day one, they killed around 200 Palestinians, most of them civilians, and beside them also some leader from Hamas or no. Meanwhile, also on Israel, in Israel, on the street, there is a several of march, and there is a several of a protest demanding to stop the war and end the war. If Benjamin Netanyahu, heard this protest or no? This is the significant question. But about United Nations Security Council, the decision and resolution, I guess I'm not optimist, because Israel have even never showing that they are adhere to the international community or international law or international ethicals about the war. And we have witnessed several of Israelis' war crime in Gaza. They are using the food as a weapon in Gaza. So this is the main things. So if Israel has some ethicals to accept the international community decision or no, or it will ignore as usual, as what I mentioned, that resolution 2334 or 242, or a several list of the justic resolution that equal giving a resolution between Palestinian and Israel to end the conflict, or to support the peace process between Palestinian and Israel. Tomorrow there is a peace conference in France between the Palestinians former foreign Nasser al-Qudwa, and also Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, Israeli former prime minister, to support and post the peace process. I hope there is, and to support also the two-state solution and giving the Palestinian right to establish their statehood and for self-determination. Benjamin Netanyahu never accept this equation because Benjamin Netanyahu, from the day one when he became a politician, he giving a promise will not let the Palestinian to establish their statehood. So this is the significant question, Osama.
And Ali, you have already mentioned that your kind of pessimism about this the resolution of UN. Does the draft's failure to explicitly condemn Hamas for the October 7th, 2023 attacks weaken its legitimacy or moral weight, according to you?
I guess we bypassed this point about condemnation Hamas attack, and there is no one accepted to be as civilians as the casualties. So either this, it will condemn Hamas, and this is not a significant issue. I guess the significant issue to hold the war. I guess to hold the war. The significant issue is not who's we should blame whom and whom. The significant issue to stop the war in Gaza, to hold the killing machine. Either the United Nations, they will condemn Hamas, or they will put the allegation toward Hamas. This is not the big elephant in the room. The big elephant is to stop the war, to stop killing machine, and to stop the people who's suffering from the starvation, the famine, suffering from finding secure their daily food. So this is the significant issue, and this is what we should concern about. I guess we went behind the condemnation and putting the allegation on which side or which from Hamas or Israel, and who's committed a mistake or etc. etc. We must save what is remain from humanitarian in Gaza or in Israel, as well as we should focus on the peace process instead of putting the allegation. It will not make any sense. Even Hamas, we condemn Hamas or we condemn Israel, it will not put any difference. It will not make any sense about these things. The main things and the initial things, we must look forward the peace process and about talk between Palestinian and Israel, and halt this war immediately, now or never. It will not be, I mean, up to when this killing and the casualties from civilians and suffering and humiliating the people on the ground, up to when it will be extending. This is the main things. We have to save what is remain of a humanity character in the Palestinian as well as Israeli. We have to focus on the peace narrative instead of looking for, forgive me for this description, for silly issue. This is the significant issue. We must look forward it.
Thank you, Ali M. Abushbak. He's an independent Palestinian researcher, for joining us and sharing that insight with us. Now, all eyes will be in the UNSC for Gaza. Now we move on to our next story. China has affirmed a new trade deal with the United States following a phone call between President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump, signaling a truce in the ongoing trade war. The deal, which builds on an earlier agreement reached in Geneva, ended a recent standoff caused by China's restrictions on mineral exports and U.S. retaliatory tariffs. China's foreign ministry emphasized that it always keeps its word and called on both sides to abide by the consensus. The U.S. imposed a combined 55% tariffs on Chinese imports, which includes a baseline 10% reciprocal tariffs and 20% targeting goods linked to fentanyl flow. China, meanwhile, faces a 10% tariff. Under the deal, China will supply essential rare earth minerals upfront, while the U.S. will uphold commitments such as educational access for Chinese students, although details on implementation remain unclear. China's Commerce Ministry stated it will continue to strengthen export control processes and foster communication to promote compliant trade. The latest talks in London helped add clarity to the Geneva Agreement, marking a hopeful step towards easing tensions between the two economic giants. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.